Hawkins.
Here.
Lewis.
Here.
Vice Mayor Whitmer.
Here.
DeGolia.
Yes. Okay. Is there any public comment? I don't see any, certainly online. You'll let me know, Anthony. Okay, let's move on to item number 1, which is discussion and direction regarding the establishment of an autonomous drone program in Atherton.
All right, Council, good afternoon. I'm excited to present this proposed program of an unmanned aerial system, commonly referred to as a drone, for the police department. And we have Tyler Roberts on Zoom, who will be giving a live demonstration of the program to give you a sense. I talked about it with the mayor and the vice mayor previously. As you know, burglaries are one of the issues that we have in town, one of our main problems. And from the police department standpoint, we're always trying to pull out all the stops that we can do to improve the safety and security for our residents. Being in the middle of Silicon Valley, we've always been on the forefront of technology in this county with in-car body cameras, tasers. We were the flagship for our license plate reading cameras as well. And I see this as one step forward in pulling out all the stops for us. Also, too, in my opinion, the most important benefit of it is what it does to improve officer safety, because it provides overwatch, which you'll hear a lot from me and a lot from Tyler Roberts. It provides an overwatch of any incident happening in town. As you can imagine, when we respond to a burglary at our gated properties or any other incidents, we don't know what's on the other side of that gate, around the corner. And so the drone provides invaluable overwatch footage that myself or dispatch can provide to those officers that are responding. And particularly with burglaries, as time is of the essence, much like the recent one we had on Friday, they're not there for very long. So if we can deploy a drone immediately, which will probably arrive before officers do, and provide that critical information, I think it's very important. The program, unlike most drone programs like the fire department, this program does not require a pilot. We don't have the staff to support a pilot. That's what attracted my attention to it. It's allowed by FAA because it's LTE technology to, from the police department, have a radius of up to 3 miles. That just happens to incorporate the town of Atherton. And also too, we're between 2 airports. We just happen to be a long rectangle between those two, that within very few limitations, we're allowed to fly this drone program. When we do deploy the drone, and we're still working out the details, what particular calls it will go on, when it leaves the police department, it's equipped with a camera, high resolution night vision. It responds without the camera activated to the residence or to the area where we're supposed to go. The camera deploys and sits there and waits for it, providing the overwatch. It's recording digitally. And when we're done, it very simply press of a button again, it returns to the police department. It offloads the information palette and stores that for 30 days. And anything that we need for our investigations, a copy is made and it's retained in the file for retention. And unless there's any questions now, I'll turn it over to Tyler, the executive representative for Paladin, and he'll be doing a live demonstration from the Villages Police Department in the Houston, Texas area.
I have a question. You know, I understand that you've shared the, let's say, policy, the one that we're using with them. Are we planning on auditing them from time to time and make sure it's being followed?
Yes, the policy, the very last section of the policy indicates that we'll be auditing the system, just like the ALPR cameras, annually to ensure privacy is always an issue, not only with the drone footage being over somebody's residence. Of course, we're sending it there for an official reason. And then the information itself and the access to the information is very similar to the flock cameras, that the administrator, which is probably going to be the commander or detectives, very few access to it, and any access there is to it, it has to be for an official reason.
Mayor DeGolia, Mona has her place.
Say it again.
Mona has her.
Oh, go ahead, Ron.
Thank you. I also wanted to remind the council that we do have to comply with Assembly Bill 481. If you recall, the council a couple months ago inventoried all military equipment as that legislation defines it, but a drone is considered to be on that list. So if the council wishes to give direction to approve this, this will be on the annual list, which again, every year you're going to have to review and determine whether you want to keep it as within your toolbox.
Other questions, Elizabeth?
A follow-up question to Mona.
Sure.
And so that list with AB 481, that becomes public record of all of the items that we have on that list.
Exactly. We have to publish it 30 days in advance before our annual reviews, and the public gets to review and comment on it as well.
I just have another
Go ahead.
one following up about, I know the chief mentioned the fact of privacy is one of our biggest concerns with any kind of overflight and automated surveillance that the town may implement. And in a perfect world, this would work perfectly, but how are we going to guarantee for the situations that are not a break-in or a robbery, that the privacy of those individuals that the video footage is being taken is?
That's a good question. That would be dependent on the call that we receive and more of our protocols as we move into adopting the program. It will only be sent for authorized calls and with authorization from a sergeant, the commander, or myself. So it won't be just sent like, I need to go look at what's happening on Alejandra and send the drone. I can't do that. Nobody can do that without authorization. And it would be easy from our auditing and from our procedures to see if it was launched unauthorized, where it went, why it went there.
Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah.
So, what do you think the time delay will be? From the time of an immediate launch, somebody calls and we verify we've called the house. The alarm's off, no one answers the phone, or that person gives an indication that there's a problem. Then you have to go and get the sergeant. What's the delay?
All the communication would be via the radio. And I think if we adopt a program and it becomes normal day-to-day operations, that time would be faster and faster. Essentially, it's just like an alarm. As soon as we receive an alarm that's monitored by our police department or another, or by another caller, we then send a car. This would be very similar. It's going to take a few seconds to what is the call, what's the information, and launch it.
Well, yeah, and the only reason I ask that is as we know, generally, these people are in and out in like 3 minutes. And so we don't want to really delay too much. That was my, so, and that's why we're getting it, right? So.
Well, I have actually three questions. So my understanding was that as soon as, for example, an alarm code is triggered at the dispatcher's station as an active alarm, that a drone would be automatically sent. There wouldn't have to be a human intervention to make that happen. It's and what I understand is this camera will not go on until it reaches the destination. So it's not going to be taking photos or images of Atherton as it flies to its destination.
As the program is set up now, it isn't automatic. It still requires human to push the button.
The dispatcher to
Right. It could be the
click.
dispatcher. It could be someone else that's providing overwatch control, but typically it's going to be the dispatcher like they do in the villages police department that you'll see probably from the demo.
Sergeant needs to include a radio. That's what he's saying in the procedure.
So does the dispatcher need to contact the sergeant, the commander, or you before?
It's recommended that when we start this program, that we start walking through it. So we kind of baby step into it. My vision is that when we get our system solidified and the policies working, that it will be the type of calls that will be listed and the dispatcher will be able to launch themselves.
Okay. Is it active now as a demo, or is it here and are you using?
We do not have it. No, this demo will be live from the villages police department.
Okay. And a follow-up question, in the annual audit, will that involve public access to seeing every location that the drone has gone?
From my understanding, that information would be public from our calls for service.
Okay, right now, the public, I mean, unless there's a public records request, the public doesn't have access to seeing, for example, what alarms the police are responding to. But they have to do a public.
Sure. The rims, yeah.
I see.
Yeah.
That's not the address.
Not the level of address, but
Well, that's fine. I'm comfortable with that. That's good.
The audit just identifies the equipment that we have in our military arsenal.
That's the 481 military.
Oh, I thought, okay, sorry.
Making sure that our protocols are being followed, that the data retention protocols are being followed, nobody's using the data
Mhm.
improperly or sending it around improperly.
Yeah, because there is human interface. It's a lot.
but every drone activation would be tracked by an incident number, more so a case number. Just like all of our investigations.
And the final question I had was, what's the dollar amount we're talking about? I know we're approving the donation here, but the staff report didn't identify.
There's different options that we're still evaluating those options. The basic option is for the first year of service for the drone, the camera, IT support, and the storage is $40,000. That includes the batteries, which are expensive. And then each year thereafter, with the addition of extra batteries when needed, it's $15,000 for the IT support and for the storage of the data.
We don't own.
We would own it. There is a leasing option that Tyler and I have been discussing, and we're considering that option as well.
Do you have a question, Claire?
Are you going to talk about how loud it is and how hackable it is?
Tyler can probably respond to that. I think from the distance, and we didn't discuss this, it flies at a minimum altitude of 300 feet, I believe up to 400 feet. So I think at 300 feet, would you think of a length of a football field? I don't think the noise is going to be that loud if detectable. There's certainly actually a deterrent factor if somebody or a suspect does hear the drone and see it, especially at night. It has lights on it like most drones do.
Yeah, Bill.
Another question. So if we buy it, then we wouldn't get automatic upgrades, whereas if we leased it, I would assume that as new technology came out, that would be.
There is an upgrade component, correct,
Yeah.
and we're still reviewing those options.
Okay.
I want to see it.
Any other questions? Okay, let's do
So I'll
the
introduce Tyler Roberts. Tyler, go ahead and take it away.
Yeah, Chief McCauley, thank you for having me, City Council. It is great to be here. Very excited to show you what we have. My name is Tyler Roberts, and I am the growth lead for Paladin. What we're going to do today, I just want to give a brief overview of what Paladin is, and then I will show you a live demo of the system today. So I will be flying it here. I'm going to shoot some links into the chat, as sometimes over Zoom, the video feed doesn't come through just because of the Zoom quality. So if you do have a screen over there that you are able to pull, oops, let me send this to everyone. Then the video feed will come through on your end. I'll also share my screen. So just a little overview of what Paladin does and sort of why we do it. There's a large lack of information when responding to 911 calls. And so we've designed a system in which, as Chief explained, you click one button and right when you receive the call, drone can take off and fly directly to the scene within minutes and provide a live overhead view. And so in Atherton, there have been some burglaries as of late, and those are at night. And so a big thing is officer safety. When you're responding to an alarm call, when you're responding to a burglary in progress, how much information do you really have on what's going on at the scene? There could be somebody waiting in the roof. There could be somebody in the backyard. There could even be a car with an exhaust pipe running. So you can even identify what car they're using. And so by getting the drone there before officers do, they now have more of a picture of what's going on and can respond more effectively and with a better plan. So this is going to keep them safer, and this is going to allow them to do their jobs more effectively. Say the first responders don't get there in time. There was mention earlier, these burglars are in and out in about 3 minutes. If the drone is there and it's overhead, it can actually follow the car as it's getting away and assist officers in locating it and telling them in the direction that it's going. So there's lots of benefits to having that live overhead feed and getting it there within minutes. There was also some questions earlier. I'll actually launch the drone and then go into a little bit of the privacy. So I'm going to share my screen here. Can everyone see that?
Yes.
Perfect. So this is what we call our Watchtower interface. So this is the actual software. This is our fleet overview. So if you have multiple drones within your fleet, you can see exactly where all of those drones are stationed throughout the city. And there are essentially 3 ways to upload the address into the drone. There's the CAD integration. So we would integrate with RIMS. So you click a button and it automatically picks the best drone for that mission based on the battery life and the ETA to get to that destination. Once you've done that, all you have to do is click open. And that will open the control center. So this control center is what we call Watchtower. It is a live video feed here, and it's really as simple as clicking one button to get started. So there's a few other ways that I'll highlight on entering a destination. You can type a couple letters up into the top right corner, and it will give you some pre-fills for addresses that are near you. And the last way to do it is to click this drop marker icon, and you can click around on the map and enter a waypoint. So let's say there's a burglary at this lake, and I'm just going to fly it over a lake today. Say there's a call comes in, and we select the destination. To launch the drone, it's really as easy as just clicking start. So I click start. I'm nowhere near the police department right now. And what happens is the drone is going to automatically take off and ascend to a prefixed altitude. And the way we choose that prefixed altitude is FAA regulations. And if you have tall buildings in your city, what we do is pick an altitude that will go over those buildings. And if there is a building higher than the prefixed altitude, we do something called the geofence. So we can actually fence that building off to make sure that it's not possible for the drone to actually hit it. If you look at the right side of the screen on the map here, you'll see this large gray area. So this large gray area is a geofence for FAA regulations. And essentially what that is once we get you the waiver and make sure that you're operating legally, in the back end of the tech, we can set a fence to make sure that no one is violating any regulations like that. While the drone's traveling to the destination, it's going to go about half mile, maybe a mile away. I want to get into a little bit of the privacy policy. So notice right here, there's 2 options for recording. So this is the live video feed. At the top right, next to these arrows, there's 2 buttons, cloud recording and SD card recording. So right now, nothing is being recorded of this flight. If I want to record, I simply toggle on or I toggle off. And it's a policy of Paladins that as you're traveling to the destination of the 911 call, you are not recording and your camera must be parallel with the ground. So we're not recording. And notice that from 200 or 300 feet up, you cannot see any specifics of anything going on below. And that's very important for us. And the second component that I want to highlight is our ethics policy. So a big thing and a big misuse of drones is routine patrols. So there's no reason for the drone to actually be out there other than it's angled down and looking for things that are going wrong. So there was no call for service and no active, I need a drone call. And so that is not allowed at Paladin. You're not allowed to do routine patrols with the drone. It's strictly responding to 911 calls. So what happens when the drone arrives directly on scene? It starts doing a 360 orbit. This was actually a request from firefighters who said that they needed all angles of the fire directly when they get there. And so what we can do now that we've arrived on scene is angle the camera down. I have all of my camera controls at the top right. I have the ability to zoom in. I have the ability for thermal. There's a few different settings. There's a dual setting with zoom. And it's really as easy as that. We try to make it as easy as possible to get the drone there and get eyes on the scene and get those first responders the vantage point that they need. I don't know if the video feed's coming through on Zoom. Is it coming through? Okay, great. If it's glitching a little bit, that's usually just Zoom has trouble relaying the feed. Okay, so say we arrive on the call and suspects are trying to flee, or say we want to scan. There was an alarm call, there is an active burglar, and we want to see if anyone's in the backyard next to it. Simply click on the screen anywhere, and the drone will move to that location. So it's really as easy as just clicking on the screen. What we can do to stop that 360 orbit is simply click the stop button. So now we're scanning the backyard. Is there anyone back there? Is it safe for officers to go into the backyard? We can zoom all the way in. It's really, and I'm not zooming into people's backyards right now on purpose. So obviously this sidewalk's not very important, but just to give you a picture of how the system works. Now there's one final way to get more finite control. You might be thinking it must be pretty hard to follow a car or a fleeing suspect just by clicking on the map. And it actually is. We've gotten a lot of feedback from public safety and people who are using it. So what we've implemented is actually keyboard control. So with AWS and D on the keyboard, I can control the movement of the drone. So I'm clicking W, it's going forward. If I click W and Q, it's going to bang to the right. W goes forward. I know you can't see what I'm doing, but I am clicking the keyboard. And so it's really just as simple as that. And so again, just going back to why do we need this? The drone arrived there within a minute. We have a live overhead view and we can broadcast this to first responders as they're going to the scene, to an incident commander if needed. And basically what officers will be able to do is see exactly what they're getting into. Thermal, if it's at night, it sort of gives them a peace of mind. I'm going to this alarm call. There's nobody on the roof. It's not an ambush. There's nobody in the backyard. And a big goal of this, and this happened with Flock, and Chief has really given me the rundown on how helpful that's been, is the deterrence factor. When you hear Atherton now has autonomous drones responding to burglary calls, you're going to think twice before going to Atherton to burglarize. I will open it up to questions now for anybody that has any on any of the tech, the system, how all of this works, safety, anything like that.
Bill.
Yeah, Tyler, if a car is moving and you want to follow that car, perhaps in a next release, can't you just click on that car and then the system will follow it?
We very, very badly want to do that, and the tech does exist. We haven't released it yet for commercial use, but it's definitely on the roadmap.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
I have a few questions. What about birds and objects that are airborne? Does it have any sensors?
So this drone has a few sensors, but what you're referring to is detect and avoid, right? So sense an incoming aircraft, sense a bird, and it will avoid it. Drone technology is not quite there yet. The mitigations that we use with the FAA, and by the way, we go through the whole process with the FAA to ensure you're using this correctly, is a visual observer. So somebody just scanning the airspace to make sure that doesn't happen.
And how loud is it?
So you cannot hear this drone right now at 200 feet. And I know next up is noise ordinance. So if when we come out and we do testing, we can set it to a prefixed altitude to the point where you can't hear it.
So when it goes to the location, I noticed it stayed at the 222 feet. Does it always stay at the upper level at whatever predetermined height is?
Yes,
doesn't
it
go
does.
down?
No, it doesn't go down.
So if you wanted to go down, you couldn't, or you're not allowed to.
You're not allowed to, and you can't. So part of the FAA process is it's just another safety mitigation. A lot of the error is when you're moving the drone up and down and you cannot see what is below you or what is above you. And so then if you go down to say 100 feet and then you start moving horizontally on a plane, then it's up to the pilot to see through the camera, am I going to hit anything? And so we pick the altitude based on your city and just making sure that it's not going to hit anything that's already there.
And one last question is, it's electric, I assume, and it's just uses a regular car charger sort of device?
So it uses a battery. Chief and I have been exploring something that's actually very cool. This is really at the forefront of drone technology. The drone, when it lands, will land in a charging box. And traditionally, what a touchpad does, so the drone lands on the touch charger and then recharges the exact same battery. And so that could take about an hour, which means that your drone now has an hour of downtime where it can't respond to a call. And so the box that we're looking into now is a battery swap machine in which the drone actually lands in the box. The machine will grab the battery out, plug it in, grab a fresh set and plug it into the drone. So you'll only have about 3 minutes of battery downtime.
Nice.
Elizabeth?
Thank you, Tyler. It's really
Yeah.
exciting. it appears to me that once the drone is launched, it launches on its own somehow with the push of a button of the dispatcher. But you manipulated it quite a bit. And so even once it got into the area, you said you can do this, you can do that. So will there be the need for a drone operator here at the police station once it's launched?
No. So is that legally or as far as deployment model?
Serviceable. I mean, practically.
So it really depends on how much involvement you want in the operations of the drone. So if, the most basic form is call comes in, click the button, and it flies there and continues. And we can give dispatchers as limited or as advanced controls as Atherton's comfortable with. In a perfect world, they're trained to do, QE, A, S, and D. If there is an in-progress burglary, the person who launches it isn't necessarily the person who has to fly it. So I can actually send you this link right now if you had the permissions, and then you could also fly it. So if you wanted a trained operator, that's also an avenue to go.
My second question is, how many other cities and who are they that are currently using this?
Yes, we have about 5 active cities. We have about 10 that are starting up programs right now. Just a little use case, Elizabeth, New Jersey. They started 4 months ago. They have 1,300 active missions responded to. And on their second day of deployments, using the exact system you'll be using, they actually arrested and put away a pedophile who had been doing things he's not supposed to be doing outside of schools. So it was really good to see that program succeeding.
So 5 cities in the whole United States.
Right. Yeah, we just started about a year ago, and then this new product has really opened it up for everyone else to use. It's gotten significantly less expensive, and the technology's gotten a lot better.
And none in the Bay Area that you know of?
None in the Bay Area. We have 2 departments starting down in the Los Angeles area right now.
Okay.
Does it have a spotlight on it so you can use it for search?
So it actually can. We have those 5 thermal settings, and then you can do what's called a dual gimbal, which is camera on one side and a spotlight on the other side.
And does it have still capabilities too, or just video and you'd have to access the video still?
Just video for now.
Okay. I love it.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Tyler. Very helpful.
Yeah. Thank you for having me, everybody. I'm gonna send the drone home just so everyone knows you click one button, flies home.
He's just been flying around while we've been talking.
Click the
Good
center button.
idea.
Can't see it. I'm not gonna leave it there.
All right, good. Yeah, bring him home.
Thank you, everyone.
Tyler, I do have a question while you're flying that home. On a mission, how long does the battery life last? How long can it be in flight?
Depends on the drone you're gonna use, but you're gonna have about 30 minutes on your drone.
Only 30.
And it will automatically go home if it needs to?
Yeah,
It won't fall down. It just runs out.
no. One of our fail safes, if it hits 20% battery, it automatically returns to home. You can override that if you need to, but don't.
I have one last question. Is the GPS data locally stored so you're not relying on real time? So if there's an emergency and the power goes out and our cell coverage is down, it'll have like a car does?
Yes.
Okay.
It's pretty cool. Pretty
like
cool technology. My God.
During public comments. Comments, members of the council, this is an action.
Mayor, it looks like there's somebody in the chat room. I don't know.
No, it's just a comment.
Oh, okay.
You posted that.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I'm all in, so I'd like to make a motion.
Wait, can I ask one last question?
And I'll second it.
Bring this in.
So Diana had a question.
I was just gonna ask, is the donor anonymous?
Don't believe so. I haven't asked that question. I don't believe so, with the activity that he's done for East Palo Alto Police. The donor is a resident. I've met with his representative twice. They're very excited. They have a foundation, and they're very excited to support law enforcement in their efforts to provide safety and security for our residents.
I just have a follow-on question, and I actually asked the city manager this question on a one-on-one, and I'll ask you. This is being funded for the first year. And then what happens after that?
I've discussed that with the donor and they're willing to fund it as far as he didn't give a deadline or a timeline.
It's not a huge, it seems like it's not a huge amount of money, if it's only like $15,000 going forward. But I mean, it is a commitment and we don't have it in our budget.
Who does the assessment of the effectiveness? So we're going to have it for a year and we'll assess the effectiveness of it.
We will do that internally and then with the assistance of Paladin.
Okay.
Okay.
I can tell you, I have spoken with the village's police chief and the Elizabeth, New Jersey police chief. Elizabeth is a large, somewhat gritty town with a lot of criminal activity. It's been a game changer for both cities, and the villages is very similar to Atherton. So to hear that from the chiefs and then talking with the people that are actually operating it, the officer safety and the response, it's been well received.
With all our trees, though, there'd be some limited view.
There's always limitations with technology, but I think most of our properties, you know, the trees are a distance away. That question has come up before, and that's certainly something that we'll be assessing.
Yeah, I love it.
To clarify the motion. Is it accurate that the motion is to adopt, for Atherton to adopt the unanimous drone program and lease this Paladin Nighthawk drone and related software for 1 year, and to accept the donation and to approve the Lexipol drone program policy that's attached to the staff report? Okay, great. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion passes unanimously. We'll move on to item number 2.
Thank you, Tyler. I'll be in touch.
Which is
Thank you, everybody.
discussion and
Bye, Tyler.
direction regarding potential changes to the Atherton noise ordinance.
So I think the staff report did a good job outlining our current situation with our noise ordinance and recent concerns. Our current noise ordinance has been in effect since 1999. Since I've been here for 5.5 years, I do realize that noise issues are an issue in our community. People move here for the privacy. The type of residents we have also like to have parties on a large, grand scale, which can create noise. And we do have a social gathering exception in our noise ordinance that allows it to exceed on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. From a historical standpoint, we receive about typically 5 or 6 noise ordinance complaints per month, and we respond. For the vast majority, I understand from longtime employees, this is not a new issue, but we have not had any issues with residents failing to comply, not being able to comply, or any arrests or any shutting down parties. One thing I will tell you, and we were working on this prior to the recent concern relayed by a resident, we were not doing the best job responding to these noise ordinances. It is somewhat confusing. We weren't doing it in a uniform manner. We were telling people to shut down parties when it didn't violate the noise ordinance. And so we have established, which was part of the package, our uniform response protocol. The decibel readers, which we have available, are being utilized. They're required to be utilized. I question that when I don't see it in the log. So we have made vast improvements on that. And I think that will take care of a lot of the issues as well related. And in the staff report, there's possible recommendations that you might consider. And I also know that you received information from a resident that outlined concerns with the new current noise ordinance.
I have a comment.
And this, my understanding is that making this recommendation and putting it on our study agenda is occasioned not from that unusual, very loud entertainment event, but this specifically comes from an ongoing problem, which has been communicated to you or notice to us several times, that, right?
Well, there was a recent concern from a resident. I would not describe it as an ongoing problem. We do have noise complaints that do occur, and a lot of them are related to social gatherings. What we are finding, though, because we weren't doing it properly, is that we're finding that a lot of the complaints, the decibel reading is within limits. And what was happening before is we would respond to the complainant, go next door, say your party's too loud, when in fact it wasn't too loud and it's within reason. So there's also, then we go back to the complaining and educate them on that fact. Like I said, 9 times out of 10, the resolution is positive.
I've brought up that there's been problems with the noise and from both my neighbors and even myself. So I've brought this up several times at council meetings, and George would say, well, we're going to look at it. So now we're looking at it.
Public comment. Is there any public comment?
I would just like to.
Yeah, Mark, you need to speak into the mic so that the recording can get it.
Thank you. I think that you all know what my situation is, so I don't need to go through it again. But as I mentioned in my letter, my concerns are, one, that the exception to the noise ordinance is rather unusual. And I have not been able to get an explanation of what the reason for that was or where the origin was. And also, if there is a justifiable reason to have that exception, the level allowed is extremely high. I believe it is not reasonable. It's 32 times the level that is the normal allowed level of noise, and that is highly excessive. And as I mentioned in my letter, I believe that anybody who listens to that would come to the same conclusion. If you had a demo of somebody playing dance music at that level, you would agree that that level is highly excessive. In fact, 2 of the officers that came to my house were looking at me going, wow, Mark, this is incredibly loud, but I can't do anything about it. And that was on the first step when the person actually brought the level down to be within the right limits. So I hope that those 2 issues will be taken into consideration. And the other issue that I had, because of my experience, is having law enforcement have the right tools to enforce the code. In my case, the individual continued to violate it. The levels exceeded the level allowed by 2 to 8 times the rest of the party. And the party went on past the time limit, which was 10 p.m. It went on till almost midnight. And as a resident that's had the problem, I would like to see a procedure that will shut down a party that goes over time. And I would like to see some methodology for better enforcement in a situation where the party continues to violate the code. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark. Okay, I'll bring it back to the council for comments. Elizabeth?
So, let's see. When I first moved to Atherton from Menlo Park, I thought, this is going to be a really quiet community. And it's not. It's really not a quiet community. There's lots of traffic all the time, and there are large parties and things like that. I think one of the things over the time that I've lived here that has happened is the development of our large parcels. We no longer just have a 3,600 square foot ranch style house on a large acre property. We have a 26,000 square foot house. and associated outside ground patios and things where it encroaches closer to the neighbor and the 10-foot setback. And so all of that party surface becomes much louder than I think it used to be when in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s, when, you know, there were all these grand parties being held in Atherton. And the parties have just gotten a lot louder, you know, with a lot of amplification. And I do think that if there is a particular resident neighbor who constantly has parties, not Diana, every week or every other week, or, you know, always, and then there should be some regulation to give the neighbors a little bit more of a relief. So I do think we should look hard at making some adjustments, maybe on the Sunday evening timeframe. The decibel, I know that every tick up of a decibel from 65 to 75, it's not just a linear thing, it's an exponential thing. So it makes a difference.
Okay, Bill.
So I think there's several things that we should look at. First off, social gathering can be anything, you know, and it can be anything. It can be two people getting together, hooting it up, or it could be, you know, a giant party. And I think having it going on from 10 o'clock and actually having a louder decibel at that time is inappropriate. I think 75 is too high. I agree with cutting things back on Sunday, although I don't think there's a lot of parties on Sunday. They're normally Friday and Saturday. And there should be some teeth in the ordinance with regards to, you know, if somebody continues to have loud parties and somebody's calling PD, and even though it's multiple times, then there's a problem there. It doesn't have to be multiple times during that one instance. It should be multiple times. They're doing it weekly. It's a problem, and we need to find a way to do that, to give people relief. It may be that we put in something with regards to, you know, at 6 o'clock, they turn down the amplifiers. It seems that they get louder at 10 o'clock. You know, as people are drinking more and things like that, the whole party gets louder. So I think that we should really, you know, consider this, you know, 10 to 12 thing with a louder decibel, which, you know, every decibel rise is, you know, you're multiplying times itself, right? So you continue to grow, and it can become a problem. I've had parties near me that have gone very loud for, you know, until 1 o'clock, 1:30 in the morning. And if you're trying to sleep or you got to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, it's inappropriate. So I think that, you know, we need to put some teeth in this. And also at the end, there was this special thing that was up to the chief. I'm not in agreement with that. That should be removed.
What do you think?
Well, at the end, there was the chief can approve a special exemption. It's in the ordinance. George tells me it's never been used, so that's great. So we're having never been used. Let's remove it so it never is removed.
Although there's two parts to that. One part is for emergencies, which I think we still need to maintain. The other part is for events, which has never been used.
Yeah, so let's remove it for parties.
I had a question. Is the violations, the ramifications, they refer to 1.20.050, which obviously is not in this.
That's the administrative penalty section of the municipal code. And one of the things the city attorney mentioned at the staff meeting yesterday was in the commander's email policy where he's escalating the fines from 100 to 200 to 300 to 500 and then doing that in every successive 15 minutes within one day. We need to also go back and change the violation for this ordinance from an infraction to a misdemeanor to allow us to do that, which will get the party's
That was my
attention.
question.
Yeah.
The 100, 200, 500 is in that 1 point.
It is in the infraction section, but it stops at 500 and it's per day. So the memo in there with the enforcement policy is every 15 minutes. But in order to do that, we have to change it to a misdemeanor.
You have to change it to what?
The violation to a misdemeanor from an infraction.
To,
I'll let the city attorney explain it. She's got the legal expertise.
Sure. So the government code caps fines and penalties that the city can impose for violations of its ordinance if the violation is an infraction, and that is $100 for the first violation in the first day, and then $200 for the second violation, second day, and that's capped at $500 per violation. However, if the penalty is increased from an infraction to a misdemeanor, we do not have the same monetary limitations. So if the police department wants to do, for example, the $100, but impose that every 5 minutes to really effectuate the purpose of this ordinance, which is to clamp down on noise violations, then the section, 8.16090, where it's talking about violations, that will have to be changed from an infraction to a misdemeanor.
so let me just clarify what you said, Mona. In order to increase the penalty or maybe even impose more than one penalty in the same day, it has to not be an infraction. It has to be a misdemeanor.
Exactly.
Can you
Great.
explain what a
That's
misdemeanor
important
actually
information.
means?
What's the ramifications of a misdemeanor as opposed to an
Yes.
infraction for the violator?
Yes.
Goes on your record.
So a misdemeanor is technically a criminal penalty. And so it could incur jail time. I've never seen that happen with something like this, but that's really kind of they both have monetary fines associated with it, but with a misdemeanor, you can also get jail time.
So if it's a misdemeanor, then they could be arrested. I mean, there could be a court action.
Correct.
The town would. Whoa.
We would have to
Does that mean-
prosecute, we would have to prosecute. So the city council would have to authorize the city attorney to prosecute misdemeanors if you wanted to do that. Now, just because you have the power to do something doesn't mean that you have the obligation to carry it out. So we can say may be subject to a misdemeanor. That's very different than shall be subject to a misdemeanor. And so that's kind of where you keep some discretion. The key here is to always enforce your codes uniformly and not in an arbitrary and capricious manner. So however you apply this to one property owner has to be the same way you apply it to every other property owner.
Can I again
So-
ask that if you were trying to apply for a job to be a babysitter and they say, do you have a criminal record? Would this be considered a crime, like a criminal record? I could be declined from being a babysitter because I had a party?
So probably not. And normally when people are having their background checks, it's usually for things that have to do with moral turpitude, like any kind of theft, anything that's considered to be a violent crime, anything that has to do with, dishonesty, things of that nature. So from my experience, I've been doing this for a little over 17 years, and I've not seen any city prosecute a violation of a municipal code like this, because with, the limited resources of the courts, most DAs don't take these and don't prosecute them, and a city would have to expend funds to take this before a court. So again, you can do it, but I have not seen it. I've just seen it employed more so that a city can impose higher fines because they want more teeth to enforce the ordinance.
And I think that the key for us is having those teeth is notifying the resident, and we apparently haven't had this issue, but if we need to, we would sit there out front of their home with their party going with the lights on our patrol cars, and every 15 minutes, there's another $500 fine. And even though our residents are millionaires and billionaires, in my experience, nobody likes fines. And I'm convinced that we will gain compliance. And then this, if we have an unusual instance, this will enable us to levy a significant fine.
Okay, let me make a couple comments. I think it's good we're talking about this because we've had some discussion about noise issues almost every year. We've never, I mean, we have looked at it like when we did our general policies but I think this is a level of inquiry that's very healthy for us to do. I think that there are two potential but very different types of noise violations. And I think our code is relatively good. I take note of Mark's comment about how we have this exception for these parties, which is unusual, and I'm not 100% sure how to deal with that. But in general, I think that, you know, this is an ordinance that's attempting to address a problem in a very healthy way by being respectful of both people that want to have parties and people that don't want their quiet enjoyment of their home and neighborhood to be interfered with. But I think there's two potential kinds of problems that are really different. One is a particularly loud party that occurs, and somebody has big amplification. They have a loud party, and you know, and they're not particularly focused on the impact that that makes on neighbors. And I think we need an ordinance to control that. I actually think the ordinance we have is designed to do that. I think there could be some improvements to it, but I think that's the focus. I think there's another kind of problem that this ordinance doesn't deal with, and that's the neighbor that doesn't give a damn about their neighbors and just makes really loud noise all the time, like once a week or once every other week. And it's not that unusual big party kind of problem that is an annoying problem that we need to control. It's a problem neighbor with respect to noise. And I think there's a number of those. And I think we need to be able to address that. When I first saw the recommendation or the staff report, there were a number of comments in the staff report about things to consider doing based on the email that we got. And the first was to change the violation from infraction to misdemeanor. And my response to that was, really? I mean, this is not a criminal thing. I don't want to go to a misdemeanor. But for that person that's making a lot of noise a lot of times, which is very annoying to their neighbors, they have to be controlled on the same day. So you can't, I don't think it works to say, we'll give you $100 fine today, and if you do it next week, we'll give you a $200 fine. If you do it a third time within the year, you'll get a $500 fine. I think that if the person is making so much noise that it's intolerable, it needs to be stopped. And I think that means you need to be able to have a second fine on the same day. Otherwise, it's not particularly useful. One of the comments that I had in what I thought was a really good summary of the Atherton Noise and Construction Ordinance summary, and Commander, I think you put that together. But I think this is exactly what we need to do. But it raised one issue for me along this line, which is, if the noise is in violation today and the officer comes and they stop it, but they don't really reduce it, then it's got to go on another 15 minutes before they're going to come back. I think that's too long. I'd rather see that be 5 minutes. I mean, if they're going to continue to blast the noise at whatever decibel we say is excessive, and the officer goes and tells them, nobody wants to be fined, but also nobody wants to have to hassle with the police. And if they go and tell them, I want the officer to sit out in the car for 5 minutes and see. I don't want him to have to go all the way back to the station 15 minutes or 20 minutes later, come back. To me, that's not as effective as
Mayor,
it could be.
the chief said that the police would stay on site for that 15-minute.
Yeah, but 15.
Now, if you're feeling.
But they've got
that
other
15 is
things to do.
Well, we would stay, well, believe me, if this person is not responding, we would pay particular attention to this person.
Yeah.
And we do need to give them a reasonable amount of time to respond.
go
I
to
think
the
5 minutes is a bit quick. I totally get where you're coming from. I think 15 minutes is reasonable, but we're not leaving. That's what they would be told when there's 3 of us here now. We're not leaving. And we're
But
gonna,
it's a DJ or it's somebody playing.
Well, maybe we could,
Some
you know,
music.
compromise and say
I
10
mean, you
minutes, like
can-
10 minutes would be. good.
It's like if you're told to turn it down, you're gonna turn it down.
well, and again, from my experience from seasoned officers, that is the case. There's also an embarrassment factor. You've got a nice guest at a nice party. Now the police have come, you see the lights. Nobody wants that.
Hanging out for,
Right.
you know,
Nobody
half
wants that.
hour or so. I mean.
I want to go to the party, but I wasn't invited.
I'm sorry, I think we also want to be cognizant of the fact that they're not responding all the time to somebody's having a social event with live bands and live music. Sometimes these events are their kids' bar mitzvah, bat mitzvah, or their wedding and social religious events and things like that that occur on someone's property where the noise just gets a little out of control. We don't want to put the officers in a position where it's combative in that sort of a situation.
But in that example too, it happens a lot where regardless what's happening, I could be talking, they don't like it's too loud. And so we have to deal with that issue as well. It happens more often than not. It's too loud. It's a kid's party. We come on scene, we listen to them. And we used to go next door and say, you need to quiet it down. Well, no, you don't. It's within the ordinance. So that's been corrected in our uniform response. So we do have the person that's just a chronic complainer. It's like, sorry, they're having a party. What's going to happen when you have a party? So we deal with that as well.
I just want to make one more comment. It's been my experience, if you're a good neighbor and you're going to have a big party, I mean, it's like a special anniversary or, you know, graduation or something. And there are a lot, Stanford, you know, a football game or something. They will go around to their neighbors with a little letter saying, you know, on this weekend, we're going to have a party from this time to that time. You know, there'll be cars parking around on your street in front of your house. And we'll have, you know, DJ and, you know, loud music until 10 o'clock at night or something, just, you know, and I think that kind of, that the neighbors are kind of like that, you know, you kind of get them primed that you're going to have a party. And then you just have to be, well, reasonable.
Yeah.
The party.
But the law's not written for that.
No,
They're
it's
good
not.
neighbors, usually.
It's not, but through code enforcement, Monica and now Lisa both do this. When we are made aware, and we often are through the permitting process or other reasons, they are advised with noise ordinances. We do strongly encourage them to tell their residents or neighbors what's happening, and more also if you feel like inviting them. 9 times out of 10, that takes care of most problems because they're at the party. But they're also advised of what the noise ordinance is and what the response will be if they violate.
Well, I think that personally, we should define what a social gathering is. It shouldn't be 2 people, 4 people, you know, it should be a real social gathering. And secondly, I don't think the noise level should be able to go up till midnight from 10 o'clock. I think, you know, 10 o'clock is a decent time to start ratcheting it down. Now, if you want to have it a little bit higher, then that's fine, but not 75. I think that's, you know, that is really wrong. And going on till midnight is not right for the neighbors. You know, a kid's birthday party, I realize some people have their birthday parties in the evening, but you know, most parties end around 10 o'clock. And, you know, in my neighborhood, a lot of them end at 10. You know, you'll hear music, it's really being blasted, no problem. 10 o'clock, it turns off.
What would be, can I ask, why would you want to define what a social gathering is? To what end?
Because you could have 2 guys that are in a band that are practicing at real high decibels. And that's called a social gathering because it's
Social
2
gathering
people.
is an exception to the ordinance code.
Right.
And that's what the residents said was unusual.
Yeah.
That the communities around us don't have that exception. That's the only reason.
Doesn't that come from the history of Atherton having started off having ballrooms and people came down? To literally freestanding ballrooms is like a history of our town is maybe why that came about. I don't know, but I know that there were ballrooms that existed back then,
Wow.
so.
That was then, this is now.
Not in my original 1923 stucco box house.
Yeah.
There was no ballroom.
and the other comment I was gonna make was that, like I said, 18.8.16.070B should be eliminated.
Can you read what it is?
Yeah, it
that's
says
the
a special
police chief.
events or he has A says that in times of emergency, he can handle it to protect lives and property. B says social events or circumstances that may warrant temporary exception to the noise levels established in this section. In such cases, a permit may be issued by the chief of police in writing stating blah, 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 blah. And that means they're exempt from the noise ordinance.
So what if it is the anniversary of Atherton and we decide that we want to do a firework exhibit?
You can't do fireworks in Atherton.
And we couldn't have a band, we couldn't do any of that. We can't do it.
You could do it till 10 o'clock and then ratchet it down.
Over at Cobra Palma Park.
Yeah.
Well, but actually by the ordinance, I think it's an exception, so.
So that's what I'm
Yeah,
saying.
that
That
would
would
be
be an
an
exception if
it's
we
an
wanted to have a
exception,
fire
it's
exhibit.
Not exactly clear. Does that mean it could be louder than 75 decibels?
The social gathering exception is limited to the 75 dB.
Does anybody know how much 75 decibels?
It's less than a leaf blower,
Yes.
less than a gas leaf.
No, that's
blower.
not true.
Yeah, that's, there was the study in our, that the mayor was referring to with respect to our general plan noise element had a chart that listed those things. And that's what Councilmember Hawkins is referencing.
5 to 7 yards.
So not like the guy that's blowing it, but if you're about as far away as you and I are from the guy with the leaf blower, that's the.
It's not 5 yards. That's. Yeah. Yeah, it's not 5 to 7.
Must be the best.
That chart that he was referring to is actually a good one to look at because it does give you a reference, because it's very hard to tell how loud that is without looking at other items as how they're measured.
Yeah, but they're off by 5 p.m.
Well, I think it's kind of more of an issue. How do we get results when we have a problem, whether it's 75 or 50? How many fines did you issue?
32. Like I said, in talking with officers that have been here for over 20 years, we have no issue problems. We respond most times it is resolved. We may have to go back, but it's resolved.
Right, but if we have a guy like his neighbor, you don't have the tool set. I mean, I guess you do,
We
right?
do. Mark's instance was an example of an improper response by my officers that was handled right.
Yeah.
And that challenge gave us the opportunity. We were already looking at it, which is why we have the protocol now. I do agree with Mona of changing it so it is a misdemeanor, so we can do the additional.
That's what I mean. What was your tool set? Find you $100.
It's mainly just, but 9 times out of 10, the police show up, knock, 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 and you need to turn it down, and we get compliant.
We're looking at the 5.
Solve the other problem.
The continuing problem where you could call it an intentional problem that goes on, not just because somebody's having a bar mitzvah once every 10 years or a big, party once on a very unusual occasion. It's because they're blasting music every weekend.
Right. And again, when someone attracts our,
Do that.
when somebody attracts our attention like that, we do a professional response until we.
No, but without it being a misdemeanor, they can only get one fine a day.
That's correct, and that's why I agree with Mona's option is it will be the way for us to go.
Like her. I like Mona, how you modified it to give us the ability to have a misdemeanor, but it wasn't a misdemeanor. How did you word that?
May
May be subject to a misdemeanor as opposed to shall be subject to a misdemeanor.
I like that. Because the word misdemeanor is in the code and it,
That gives some teeth.
Mhm,
We
it
didn't
gives-
have before.
right.
Right.
And
And if it came
it's
to it,
not
I
absolute.
think that's helpful.
we technically could make a physical arrest if it came to that. That would be a huge failure. But it would give that possibility. I can't foresee that happening, but at least the threat of like, hey,
foresee
If you don't
I
do,
think that
if
if
you
you
don't
can give-
comply,
If you can give an escalating fine
Uh-huh.
every
10
whatever,
minutes.
X number of minutes, that's gonna be, I don't think we want to go to the arrest route unless there is a criminal. reason
No, we
that the
wouldn't. I
officer
mean, unless
decides
it
he
came
needs
to the,
arrest someone.
unless it came to the point of you're just ignoring us.
So I think if this gives us some teeth we didn't have before, I think that's helpful.
Right.
I think the
I
procedure is
personally
great.
think that the idea of reducing the time period to 8 PM on Sunday is healthy. I also would think that reducing the sound volume at 10 PM on Friday and Saturday would also be healthy. Maybe it should go to 70 dB at 10 PM.
I think 70 would be fine.
I think that's reasonable.
The difference with the leaf blower analogy is that, number one, leaf blowers are not in the middle of the night or in the late at night.
Right.
And there's a lot of more ambient noise going on, like construction, which is not part of our noise ordinance. I mean, that is clearly an exemption, but there's, the construction projects make a lot of noise.
But the noise ordinance does address that in that it says that there's a 5 dB ability in excess of the ambient noise.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Rather than just.
For
saying-
construction?
For
Oh.
a noise violation.
Okay.
Right now, it's a 60 dB,
65.
during the daytime would be a noise violation, but if the ambient noise level is at 60, then the ordinance says it would be 65, that would be the noise violation.
No, it just says here in B, I forget what it is, 816.050. B, number 1, under B says power equipment including, but not limited to, leaf blowers, vacuums, power mowers, rototillers, and other similar equipment are exempt from the basic regulations between the hours of 8 AM and 6 PM, Monday through Friday. It should be 5 because we cut things off at 5. And 10 AM to 5 PM Saturday and 10 AM to 3 PM Sunday.
Those are gardeners. Construction
That's-
is
yeah.
exempted.
Yeah, no, I understand, but I was just saying it's
I
not,
understand,
it's
but
not
that
plus
was all
5 dB,
landscaping,
it's,
so.
they're exempt, period.
Totally exempt, right. Yes. Yeah, that's in relation to the basic noise regulation. The exemptions, as Vice Mayor indicates, are exempt. Construction during those set hours.
Yeah.
Power equipment during those hours.
Yeah, but we cut down the stop construction at 5, so going to 6, we should probably go ahead and cut it back to 5.
Well, if you want your gardener to totally end at 5 o'clock, because that's what's regulating more your gardener who might be trimming your tree or hedge or whatever, they work past 5. And they're allowed to work past 5 o'clock. They're not
Finish a
construction,
project.
to finish the project.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, I try not to let that happen.
Yeah,
You-
I think most
do you,
people
Bill?
do that. Yeah, I think it should be 5 o'clock.
Yeah, I mean, cut.
Well, then you can't come home and mow your lawn.
No, I can't.
Staff have enough direction?
Well, I just want to make sure of that. And so it's reducing it on Sundays, not Sundays and holidays, Sundays to 8 PM.
I like that.
So the holidays came out.
So the holidays.
Yeah.
Okay, 'cause
holidays
that-
are
we
separate.
didn't even discuss that. but Okay.
Remove section B, which authorizes the chief to issue a special event permit for noise.
Reducing the decibel level.
Reducing it to 70 on after 10 o'clock on Friday and Saturday. What about the 75 overall? Or was
Oh,
it
we
just
said
reduced
70.
No, we said 70 at 10 o'clock.
At 10 o'clock. Is it 70 overall? Or is it 70 at 10 o'clock? It drops.
I think it's 70 overall.
What do you got? What-
No.
I think it should be 70 overall.
70, no, I think 70 at 10 o'clock.
What doesn't make sense to have a noise ordinance that raises the decibel level at 10 o'clock when some people are going to bed or whatever.
No, it,
It's 75.
Social
The
gathering
party,
exception.
the social
Oh, I see. Okay. All right, and then,
Then the misdemeanor change.
May,
That's part of your change.
yeah.
Is that the?
Yeah, maybe we should define social gathering so that it
Yes.
can't be interpreted as,
10 or
you
more
know, somebody
people,
practicing on a trumpet.
right, 10 or more.
yeah,
10 more sounds.
Do I have 10 friends who come over and social with me?
Are you going to separate these things or we vote on them separately? Are you
No, we're
bundling them
just
all
giving-
together?
Why
It's
don't we
not
go
all-
together.
Just
You're just giving direction at this point. We've got to come back with an ordinance amendment and then.
Okay.
get
I
part-
agree.
Because we don't agree with all of them, but
But
some of
the
them.
social gathering number question, the city attorney and I have been having a conversation about that. In some communities, it's 50 or more. Other communities don't have that exemption at all. Other communities just say outdoor gathering. My questions have always been, how is the PD going to actually do that? They get to an event, let's say your number is 10 and they count 10 people, or you bring in your kids and they now count 10 people, or one left, are you now no longer allowed to have the event? So that, I mean, those are my,
Well, most people that are having an event have more than 10, okay? So I think we're
Yeah.
getting a little silly here.
yeah.
I think 10 is a good number. You know, in the park, we don't require people to get a permit until they have 13.
Right.
So that's, I mean, how did we set that? Well,
We
you
count.
know, they can have their
We
kid there or not have their kid there. Come on.
But
So-
Andre actually counts in that circumstance. I just don't want the PD having to interrupt the party, walk on and count the number of attendees in order to determine whether they're available.
I don't think people are gonna complain about that. They're complaining about the noise. And, you know, you'll be able to see most of the time it's gonna be a large party. So not,
If there's, you know, a couple that are playing music loud all the time, it takes that out of the social gathering.
Right.
Which is an exemption. So and well, okay, what if you have 4 or 6 people? I mean, the idea is just to set a number somewhere. I think 10 is reasonable, because you don't want to. That's more than a high school band.
right.
So come back with a definition of social gathering, starting with 10 as your lower limit.
Can I make a recommendation to the council for your consideration? So I think that there's 2 issues, right? The first one is, what is the town's base noise limits that it's willing to accept outside of social gatherings, special occasions? What is it that you're willing to tolerate on weekdays, weekends, daytime, nighttime? We established that. The second issue is, what are we willing to tolerate for these social gatherings or special events? And I think at some point, it becomes a little bit less important, the number of people who have gathered, as opposed to the decibels that are emitted from the property. Because as the chief and his staff, I'm sure, are familiar, you can have 10 people who are making 80 decibels worth of noise, or you can have, 50 people indoors, windows and doors closed, and not exceeding those levels. So we want to be able to equip our staff with the authority to be able to enforce it, as the mayor was also saying, that allows use of your property, but not to the detriment of the neighbors and your surrounding communities. So I would say that if you decide what your thresholds are for regular, weekdays, weekends, and what you're willing to allow for these special events, that might be kind of a more enforceable way of implementing this ordinance.
Which I think you've done.
Well, yeah, I first off, if people are on the inside with the windows closed, I doubt you're going to have the 75 decibel or 70 decibel coming out to the neighbors where it would be measured. I think that really it makes sense to define social gathering.
It's not 70, it's 60 decibels.
Yeah, right.
So that, if I understand this correctly, the issue is, how do you manage noise when it's in excess of 60 decibels?
Right.
And if it's a social gathering by ordinance, it gets an additional 15 decibels, which is 36 times the noise level of 60. So the issue of what is a social gathering, I think, becomes quite important. And this is where I think I want to see us be able to control it, Mona. If you have someone who's just a couple that are living in a house, and maybe a couple and 3 kids are living in a house, and they're blasting music every day at 70 decibels, that right now they could claim that's a social gathering and therefore it's covered under the ordinance. And I don't think that's a social gathering. That's where I thought the 10 person kind of was useful. But I'm happy for Mona and George to put language together and propose it. But I want to be able to control that renegade couple that are bothering their neighbors by exceeding 60 decibels. Because right now they only can, if I understand it, unless they're using leaf blowers or lawnmowers or something, they can't exceed 60 decibels unless they can claim they're engaged in a social gathering.
So do you wish to limit the number of social gatherings a property owner can apply for and receive annually?
Well, you don't have to apply for anything.
They're
Well-
not applying for these.
They
now,
don't
so
apply for it, they just have it.
we do have the special event permit that I issue that allows people to, have valet parking and things like that when they're going to impact their neighbors. That's different, and they still have to comply with the noise ordinance
Right.
as it's written.
But right now, I don't know if the police are going and somebody's having a party, they're probably looking at 75 decibels rather than 60 decibels.
Yeah.
And if that person having that party is just a couple and their friends,
Right.
I mean, 2 friends, that's really different in my opinion.
We can
than a
craft
social-
something and for the councils to wordsmith and talk about.
All right. Okay.
Great.
You have no
Nice
directions, Chief?
discussion.
Can I'm not, one last question is, how are we dealing with repeat offenders? That wasn't clear to me in this discussion.
Misdemeanor.
Well, I think you're more talking about,
To do more than one in the same evening.
right.
What can we talk about? What we
Every
do with the
weekend.
person who does it every weekend? And do we have anything written or proposed about dealing with repeat offenders?
Well, you're assuming that a person who has an event at their house every weekend is going to be exceeding the decibel levels, okay?
True.
And be, a bad actor. I don't want to restrict anybody from having a party at their house every week.
I think that's what she said.
Well, yeah,
What you're saying is, we talked about system that forces the guy
In the event itself.
at night to shut things down or pay $500 every few
Right.
minutes.
if they're bad actors.
But what you're saying is, what if it's a person who
Does it
has a
also-
noisy party every month?
Yes.
or-
This is a
Or
bad
every 6
actor.
weeks?
Yes, yes. How do we
So-
deal with that? We don't have. a
Because we
tool.
don't have an escalation clause. We didn't talk about escalating for the second violation in the same year. or-
No, we have that. We have that. We could make it stronger if we wanted to, but right now what we have is the first violation. And now because we're making it a misdemeanor, it's whether it's on the same day or different days, it's going to be the same thing. The first violation within a year is $100. Second violation within a year is $200. Third violation within a year is $500. And every violation within a year thereafter, whether it's on one day or multiple weekends, is an additional $500.
How does it work though, if you have a party and I've escalated, I didn't listen to him and I kept going and I'm accruing the 100, the 500, 500. So now
On that
I
one
have
night.
$1,000 party because I don't want
Now,
to.
and now you,
So now it's
you
the
get
next
filed
day.
with a misdemeanor charge by PD.
So the next day, if I have a second party, where does that one start?
Starts at
Does it start
500.
the whole thing again? or
No,
does
no,
it
it
start-
Starts at 500.
So you're starting at the second.
You're starting
Starting
at
500.
what right now is the top level. I mean, we could make it $1,000.
No, that, I think we're fine.
Well, and the PD keeps a record of these things within their system, so they know when they're going back out to the same address, same property owner, same type of violation, and they will just continue to escalate that
What we
enforcement.
need to do
that
is
tool.
get their picture and post it on our boards. Violation of, shame,
Shame board.
noise ordinance violator, right?
That does happen.
Public shame.
Like the people that are delinquent in our country club do.
Can I ask the chief a
Or
question on this
water
this
bills.
particular enforcement topic? Do we have situations in town where it is not a property owner who's having an event, but it's a property owner who is leasing their property to have an event on a semi-regular basis throughout the year?
We have that with the Airbnb and we had some residents like that. Now, that's a different violation of a different ordinance, which
Right.
allows code enforcement to respond to that. We would still be responding with the noise ordinance. And then taking information if we believe it's an Airbnb or.
Where I think that relates rather than to the Airbnb issue of rental is there are, I don't know how many, but I know there's at least one property that is owned and used as a venue for parties. And
There's
that-
several.
and I think if that's a noise ordinance, that's a problem. And right now, if I understand our noise ordinance, it doesn't like look at who it is that's violating, if they're violating at the same house, you're treating that house. If you've done it once in the year and you do it twice in the year at that house, you're escalated up to the next level.
Right, then it's just an immediate shutdown.
Who gets the violation in that case? Is it the
Property owner.
renter or the owner?
Property owner.
Property owner gets it?
I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what if it's somebody who's renting, who's living in a property as a rental? Then
think it's-
probably them that gets the residents.
I think it's important to note too, we don't go out actively patrolling for noise ordinance violations. Obviously, if it's something egregious, then we would, but we rely on neighbors to be offended and comply.
I just want to say you did a great job on that, on the articulating the procedure. I think that really did a long way to address this issue. So I think that was great. So thanks.
I'd like to hear from Mark and see what he has to say.
Say, let me just offer up another opportunity for public comment if there is any public comment. Yeah.
Just a couple of things. I mean, I obviously don't want to stop anybody from having parties. People should be able to have parties. And as Diana said, there's a long tradition in Atherton of parties, and I wasn't there. I look 100 years old, but I'm not. But obviously, a lot of these parties happened in ballrooms at a time when people did not use amplifiers and electronic music at insane levels. And
Right.
obviously, the neighbors were pretty happy. There was no consideration about that, but times have really changed, and the levels of amplification and the type of music that is used has changed a lot. I believe that most of us have been sitting at a red light sometime when somebody stops next to us and they're running the bass at some insane level and your own car is vibrating. And that's what one experiences at 75 dB when a neighbor is doing it. You know, we talk about examples with leaf blowers, but that's a constant level. And having a bass note that is pulsating like that is very different to the human body because it actually hits you in the diaphragm and it produces the flight or flight response. And one of the reasons why people like those low bass notes like that is because they get addicted to the adrenaline kick from that. So we're really talking about levels like that. And, you know, I want to be reasonable, and I said in my letter that the base Atherton code is very reasonable, but I am very grateful and delighted to see that the council is taking the issue seriously, and that hopefully this will move in a direction that will give us a better code. And I also want to thank our chief of police for getting involved and from spending time talking to me. And, you know, I would really like for our police department to have all the possible tools that they can have to be able to enforce the code and also to not affect the residents, even if they are violators, you know, too much or unfairly, right? There's a fine balance here, and I think you know it, and you're hitting it right on the money.
So I'd just like to make a quick comment based on some of the comments that Mark made. The San Mateo County noise ordinance does address throbbing noises. And I think we should look at that and bring that into the code as well, because that is a violation. So, you know, when there's already procedures and processes that are written, I think that if we can get something to make ours better, I think that
That language is in our current ordinance.
Yeah.
it's
It's in there now.
Wow, okay.
All
All right, Bob.
Can't give you one-
Happy anniversary, Bob.
I'll give you one suggestion until we meet again. I found it interesting. I downloaded a decibel reading app on my iPhone. There's several out there. I calibrated it with our decibel reading that's calibrated. It's accurate. It's very interesting when you think, well, how loud is that? Just like how fast is that car going? So I would encourage you to take a look at that and download one, and they're very accurate, and it was very eye-opening. There's different ones. You can just go to the App Store, decibel reader.
Okay.
For your phone. You have one right there. Oh, that's not-
Are you gonna play us some 75 dB right now?
Decibel.
Oh. Why you're gonna play us some